Lesson 1, Part B, has us answering the question, how did economic factors lead to the Great Depression? And this is still Unit 6, the early 20th century. The standard that we're looking at is analyzing the important events that occurred after World War I and their impact on Georgia. Element B is explaining the economic factors that resulted in the Great Depression. Element A had us looking at the natural forces that led to the Great Depression. The essential vocabulary that you need to know would be the stock market crash of 1929, bank failures, the reduction of purchasing, overproduction, laissez-faire, and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff of 1930. The Great Depression was not caused by one factor, but many. Though Georgia, a predominantly rural state, was already suffering from a depression due to the boll weevil and drought, the economic boom experienced by the rest of the United States ended with the stock market crash of 1929. In this downturn, stockholders lost over $40 billion, and businesses were never able to recover from these losses throughout the 1930s. However, a series of other factors led to the continuation of a worldwide depression for almost a decade. Some of the economic factors that led to the depression were bank failures, reduction of purchasing, and overproduction of agricultural products. During the 1920s and 1930s, there was no insurance protecting bank deposits. If enough of the bank's customers tried to withdraw their money, the bank would eventually run out. This was called a bank failure. After the stock market crash, this actually happened, and many banks failed in the early 1930s. In turn, many people lost their life savings. Those banks that managed to stay in business were hesitant about making loans, thus slowing down the purchasing power of big business and the individual buyer. In the 1920s, an American economic policy was called laissez-faire. Businesses were left alone, and for some time, things appeared to be fine. American businesses reported record profits. Production was at an all-time high. The problem was that while earnings rose and the rich got richer, the working class received a disproportionately lower percentage of the wealth. This uneven distribution of wealth got so bad that 5% of America earned 33% of the income. What this meant was that there was less and less real spending. Despite the fact that the working class had less money to spend, businesses continued to increase production levels. So we come to the overproduction of agricultural products. Before the major droughts that hit the Midwest causing the Dust Bowl, many farmers overproduced. In the 1920s, Midwestern farmers produced record numbers of agricultural products. However, this overproduction led to a tremendous drop in the price of agricultural products and dramatically limited the profit margins of farmers. During a period of time where millions were starving, farmers destroyed much needed food or stopped growing crops altogether in order to attempt to raise the price of agricultural products. A major drought hit the Midwest in the 1930s, driving thousands of farmers from their homes and added to the millions of Americans already out of work. In what would become a vicious cycle, after the stock market crash and due to other economic fears, the average consumer stopped purchasing goods. When people stopped buying products, companies in turn lowered their production rates. With lower production rates, many consumers lost their jobs and had no money to spend. With an unemployment rate of 25%, this further lessened the purchasing power of the average consumer. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff was a piece of legislation that was originally intended to help protect domestic farmers against agricultural imports. During World War I, countries outside of Europe increased their agricultural production. Then, when the war ended, European producers stepped up their production. Thus, massive agricultural overproduction occurred during the 1920s. This, in turn, led to declining farm prices during the second half of the decade. By the time the legislation was passed, the bill raised tariffs not only on agricultural products, but on products in all sectors of the economy. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff was more a consequence of the Great Depression than an initial cause. However, its passage did not help end the Great Depression, and in fact it caused more suffering. It provoked a storm of foreign retaliatory measures. This contributed to a drastic decline in international trade. For example, U.S. imports from Europe declined from a 1929 high of $1,334 million to just $390 million in 1932, while U.S. exports to Europe fell from $2,341 million in 1929 to $784 million in 1932. World trade declined by about 66% between 1929 and 1934. In less monetary terms, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff fostered distrust among nations, leading to less cooperation in either the political or economic realms. So how do you make sense of all this? What we find is that the Great Depression was not caused by one event or set of circumstances. There were many causes that led to various effects, which, when taken together, became the Great Depression. There are other resources that have been posted on Google Classroom along with this lesson that you need to explore. Read about each of the causes that are listed on the chart that are posted in the assignment for Lesson 1, Part B, and then complete the chart and submit. In simple terms, the chart is a cause and effect. The cause has been given to you. Fill in the effect part for Lesson 1, Part B.